let's get going. This is Allan Watkins with Technology Transformation Management. Make it easy for our clients and friends. We just go by TTM. 10-year-old technology consulting and brokerage. So help clients, whether it's simplistic cost management tools, to advisement on network architectures, to security. We've got a team of experts and a great ecosystem of vendors. So with that, security needs to be top of mind. There's a lot of things going on as we've made this COVID shift, and we wanted to invite Masergy. To give you a little background on Masergy, we're not going to go too in depth on their history, but I've worked with or competed against them for over 20 years, I believe it is, and will tell you that they have been a market leader, typically about 2 years ahead on the technology layer from either Verizon and AT&T on the network side. About 5 years ago, they acquired a leading security operations center, and they've been able to adjust and add some different things into their portfolio to make security more native to their network or the customer's private cloud and interconnects to the public cloud. So with that, I don't want to overspeak it, but Morgan has joined us with Masergy. How are you doing, Morgan?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
No problem. So, I know we've got a little bit of a slide deck to go through. How is everything treating you with the work from home aspects today?
Yeah, I mean, so far so good, I guess you could say. I'm recently married about eight months ago, and my wife and I, who typically both travel for work, looked at each other and said, well, this will be a first good test of our the first year of marriage. So far so good. We're still happily married and looking forward to the future.
That's fantastic. We've joked. Phil on our team has a background in psychology, so we've joked with some of our clients about if your team needs him, he's available to help via WebEx. But it's definitely interesting times and.
Yeah, for sure. My dogs might need them once we go back to work because they're gonna miss having their parents at home all day.
Well, awesome. Well, I will give you the floor and maybe inject with some questions here and there.
Sounds good. No, thanks again, TTM, for putting the webinar together, and thank the attendees as well for giving us a few minutes of your time this afternoon. Again, my name is Morgan McGowan. I'm one of the security product specialists here at Masergy. I've been in the security space for about 15 years. Originally was an IT guy or a security practitioner for a number of years, working in the collections industry, which is another webinar and another interesting story. But I moved over to the consulting side, within the past 7-8 years, and today, kind of try to help Masergy's customers and help our partners kind of navigate the security landscape and help map some of their needs to our capabilities. So brief kind of agenda of what we thought we were going to go over today in today's webinar was, I think the first thing I wanted to do is just put a little bit of a spin, have some kind of take some of the things that we hear every day in the news as it relates to data breaches and security, and maybe put a little bit of a personal touch to that and show maybe how that's impacted me and potentially how that's even impacted you, and then bring that full circle to how it could potentially be impacting your customers, and ultimately what we can do to help put some controls in place to mitigate the risk that I think that we're all facing today as it relates to just cybersecurity in general, and especially in today's COVID work from home, distributed workforce and environment. And so you've probably seen a slide like this that shows a timeline that outlines some of the largest data breaches over the past 10 years. But I figured I'd put kind of a different spin on this and show you the ones that have personally impacted me. And I've also notated under each of these breaches how many overall users or people were impacted by the same breaches that myself were involved in. And for all you wondering, Yes, I did have a MySpace account, and apparently 2015 was a good year for me because there were no data breaches. But if you're curious, how these breaches may have impacted you, or how you may have been personally impacted by other breaches, I've got a source link at the bottom here, and we'll share this later. And if you just go to haveibeenpawned.com, enter in your email address. You can try work, you can try personal. Just try a variety of different email addresses you've used in the past, and this is a really good tool for telling you what breaches you may be involved in, or have been involved in, or impacted by, and what data was potentially exposed in those breaches.
Now, let me add there. So, guys, if you don't mind, if you have questions as we go along, please add it to the chat. We on a past webinar with all the work at home, we did open up the bridge, and it was. We had health and safety concerns for somebody on that bridge as we opened it up, because there was some really screaming going on. It was pretty funny. But we may not open the bridge this time as far as audio. And then in addition to that, we do have some tools where we can pull some reports on your corporate as far as anybody that's been breached and their passwords they used in the past. So these are some tool sets we have access to if you need such a thing. Sorry, go ahead, Morgan.
No, good note. So, it's no secret that these breaches have been happening for a long time. But when you put into context how many of those have impacted you, it kind of adjusts the lens that you're looking through and puts a personal impact into perspective. And I imagine that many folks on this call were probably impacted by some of the ones that you see on the screen here today. So, I guess kind of what this begs the question. Obviously, this has been going on for quite some time. Why have they been happening for so long? Why do they continue to happen? And unfortunately, the answer is pretty straightforward. And it's one word. It's money. These activities are highly profitable. And as long as they are highly profitable, and as long as our data is valuable, folks are still going to target that data and try to profit from it. And so if you're curious, like I was, as I was kind of going through this and trying to better understand how I've been personally impacted over the last decade or so, these are some of the numbers that are often circulated about the value of our personal data. So this is just a few examples. A credit card number on average is worth about $5 in the black market. Typically a lower value, because once the banks get wind of it, obviously they shut down all the cards impacted by the breach, and so the lifetime of that data, the value of that data, is a little bit smaller than maybe other things that you see here. Pair that up with the social security number, those things don't change. Again, the more data that they're collecting, and the longer that data is useful, the more data the more valuable that data is worth. Bank account details, of course, for obvious reasons, are very valuable because there's a direct access to financials there. And then if for some reason they can get a full corporate or a full identity or a full dossier on you, healthcare records, social security number, bank account details, things that you would find in some of the large database engines that are out there, again, that becomes more valuable because they could do a lot more with that data. And so if you think back just to a couple slides ago when I had the breaches that had impacted me personally, can you guess how much my data was worth just for the handful of breaches that you saw there? About $395. And so you may think, oh, that's not all that much money, but when you put into context the fact that there were millions of folks that were impacted by these breaches, you can see why there's a huge financial incentive for folks to continue to do this. And even if you bring this down to a smaller scale, let's say that the organization that you work for, maybe they only have personal data of a couple of thousands of users. Well, still, if a threat actor can get access to that information and it's just a month's worth of work, they can make a quick couple $100,000 and move on to the next thing. But even if you don't have any valuable data, or your organization doesn't have any valuable data, don't worry. There's a way that they can impact you as well, and that way is ransomware. Today, or projected for the end of this year, ransomware is going to cause $9.3 billion in projected damages, and this is pre-COVID. This may of course fluctuate based on our current situation, but ultimately this is this is the GDP of a small country, and this is only just for the U.S. The projected world total is in over $100 billion. But the average demand for ransomware is about $85,000, and that's only being paid about 30% of the time. For the folks that elect not to pay it, the penalty is, having to essentially rebuild systems from scratch and be down from weeks to months. So there's a pretty high toll this can take on a business, and of course we want to make sure that we're putting the appropriate controls in place to prevent both of these types of scenarios so that you're not personally impacted. But I guess kind of looking back or peeling the onion back a little bit is why have threat actors been successful for such a long period of time? And there's a number of contributing factors. For the longest time, we were really only concerned with security at corporate data centers. All critical applications and critical data resided there. Most internet traffic was backhauled. Security was easier back then. You were really only having to guard the front door, not the entire city. And so we all know that that's no longer the case. And not only do we have data scattered all over the place, but nowadays, so is our workforce. So it's making it more and more difficult to keep our eyes and our ears open in the right places and make sure that we have continuous context to some of the events that are occurring. And so, in summary, now that data is distributed, our security strategy has to cover all of these areas, and it's not quite as simple as it might seem to be. At the end of the day, the attacker only has to find one way in, and that's not that difficult to do. And again, these were all contributing factors pre-COVID. So now fast forward a little bit, and while most companies had some sort of remote workforce capabilities, never had we ever seen an event that forced hundreds of millions of people to work remote at the exact same time. And so, needless to say, threat actors have taken advantage of both the technical challenges and a very distracted workforce, and the result's been a significant increase in attacks that are targeting the circumstances of this pandemic. Again, the attack methods and the things that are occurring aren't necessarily unique to what we're experiencing today. It's just simply that it's just at a much higher volume than it was a couple of months ago, simply just because folks are scrambling to keep up and obviously to push their workforce to working remotely. And security is not always the first thing you're thinking about when you're doing that. You're trying to keep business operations up and running. So what do you do, I guess? The first thing when we're talking to our customers is that, we want to do a little bit of self-reflection. We want to be honest about where your security program sits. What side of the spectrum are you on, right? Or do you not have a security program at all? Do you have a pretty good security program, but that just needs a little bit of tuning and tweaking? Regardless of where you're at, there always can be improvement. And even if you have nothing in place today, that's okay. Knowing is the first step in creating an improvement process, and that helps drive how to get to a better place. And so what you hear a lot of folks out there trying to do is they're trying to push you to specific point products to help address whatever immediate need you might have at that point in time. And these are great solutions. We work with a number of these vendors, and they have very effective products that allow you to mitigate specific types of threats. But nothing here really represents the security silver bullet, so to speak. Now, buying one of these products isn't going to solve all of your challenges. You got to have a little bit of a different approach and think about it in a different way to make sure that down the road you're not caught with sunk investments that aren't going to pay dividends over the number of years that they require. And so, if I could suggest maybe a little bit of a different approach, rather than trying to purchase all these tools and hire people and develop all these processes, of course, if you haven't already done so, another way to look at this is to try to find a provider who have built up these capabilities and have already gone through the process of procuring the foundational tools for you. And they've got years of experience making heads and tails of the security events and the data and can arrive to a conclusion or an incident response procedure, in a timely fashion when time matters. When these events happen, and some of the statistics that you see on the screen are just a medium-sized business, medium-sized enterprise, and some of the operational challenges that these SOCs have got in trying to make heads and tails of the data that these tools produce. And so, as we talked about a little bit earlier, Masergy's been in the security game for around 20 years by way of an acquisition about 5 years ago. And we can help you develop a security program in a number of different ways. And we've got two distinct areas of focus, from our professional services division, which is the little hacker guy on the left, to our full outsourced SOC process or SOC program, which is the shield or the defensive mechanisms that we have on the right. And really our pro services division, these guys have got a vast experience in conducting red team, blue team exercises, which are, offensive and defensive exercises to, if you're on the mature level of the security spectrum and you want to put your processes to test, this is a really good way to do that, to engage with a firm that has years of experience in trying to uncover vulnerabilities within an enterprise and then ultimately help the enterprise overcome those vulnerabilities through a consulting engagement. And we do that through penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, and even if you don't have a mature security program and want to understand where you need to start, we can perform baseline security assessments. We've got CISO advisory services that can also help with that, as well as doing gap assessments against various compliance control frameworks. And these services are offered independently of our managed SOC service and can be structured in a number of ways to kind of help you get a security program off the ground. On the managed security front, as we mentioned earlier, we've got 3 security operations centers across the globe. We employ about 120 certified security analysts that help our customers uncover events with the goal of stopping threat actors before damage can be done. And so the platform that we provide is often called in the Gartner quadrant called managed detection and response. But ultimately, this is a fully turnkey product that includes a number of different security tools that will help you increase your baseline security posture by providing things like a SIEM, for log monitoring, a vulnerability scanner, a customized IDS IPS, which is a signature-based tool that allows us to detect vulnerabilities at the network level, as well as a flow-based monitoring platform that allows us to sniff out east-west traffic within an environment. But ultimately, these tools are fed back into a machine learning platform and security analytics platform within a single solution. And so the other thing to call out is that this solution also takes advantage of existing technology investments. And so if you've got some existing security tools, and everyone does, whether that's from firewall to endpoint products, this solution also allows us to take advantage of those existing investments, but add some additional layers on top of that and ultimately round out the approach to security to make sure that you have your eyes and your ears in all the right places, but then ultimately you've got a large group of certified analysts that have the ability to look at the events as they're occurring and ultimately be able to drive to a conclusion on how to remediate those events in a short amount of time. When we're talking about the breaches that I've been personally impacted by, all of these companies, and they're all large companies, had security practices and programs in place, but ultimately, just didn't have either the folks or the processes to be able to elevate the most critical events in a short amount of time, which ultimately led, to a negative event happening. And so the goal for us is to assess the situation, understand where you sit from a security perspective today, provide some tool sets that complement what you're doing, but ultimately make sure that we have visibility across the entirety of your organization, whether that's on-prem data center footprints, whether that's in the cloud, whether that's your remote workforce, and ultimately tying that together into a single platform. And so, I guess, what does all that mean? Ultimately, these tools, do what? They generate an immense amount of data, and you've got to have a really good way of making heads and tails of what to pay attention to. And so, what our platform does is it enriches the data with various threat intelligence feeds, and then elevates the most critical events that are reviewed by certified security analysts, which ultimately results in the delivery of actionable incident response back to our customers, and thus drastically reducing the number of false positives. So, I mean, the goal of our SOC is to have actionable incident response kind of in your hands, within 15 minutes of critical alerts hitting our analyst desk. Now,
Morgan,
while we also, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Morgan. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to interject that, often my recommendations to, CIOs I meet with is skip the SIM and go for the SOC. That, the staffing cost and the churn you're going to experience once people update their LinkedIn profiles is going to be a challenge, leaving holes. Plus, the tuning in of a SIM can be challenging. Get with a SOC and, have them either provide or assist with, putting the SIM foundation in place. So something you would agree with?
Yeah, definitely. And, oftentimes these discussions are facilitated by just that, by, someone saying, hey, everyone thinks that the SIM is the foundational component to starting a security program, but it's also one of the most complex tools to implement and to manage. And the folks that have the capability to do that are also the ones that are the most sought after in the marketplace. I've got, from my past lives and working in SOCs, I've got, folks that, are getting offers, almost multiple offers per month for multiples of what they're making today. And so it is out there, and that is a challenge that you have to face if you choose to do so in-house. But what we suggest is, maybe as opposed to trying to do those things and to balance those challenges, is to look at something like this, simply just because it alleviates the need to have to procure, to source the actual tools, but B, then to manage those tool sets. But the other thing that I'd point out here is that, a lot of our customers are technical, or they do have existing security staff that have other areas of responsibility within the business, but ultimately need visibility into what an outsourced SOC provider might be doing. And so we do bring all of this full circle in the fact that we do effectively allow our customers to access the same tools, the same data, effectively the same portal that our analysts use to do some of their monitoring jobs. And you can dig in, you can effectively have access to the same thing. And so this isn't a black box suggestion, meaning that, hey, just trust us. Many of our customers do have a process for going and peer reviewing the events that we uncover. They have a process also for fact checking some of the things that our analysts are doing. And so that is a benefit, and something that many of our customers appreciate. There are certainly other ways to kind of look at the same information that we just shared. This is more of a technical way to look at it, and ultimately the thing that we want to convey here is that that we have the ability effectively to look at all areas of the business, whether that's network, endpoint, or cloud. And there's various ways that we go about doing that. But ultimately, some of the things that you would hear in a conversation like this would revolve around software as a service applications that you need additional visibility into, and a conduit to be able to do that. And so for us, that's what we call Cloud Access Security Broker, which again is a Gartner term that allows us to uncover security events in SaaS platforms. It's very valuable information. It also allows you to apply additional security controls. And then the same for infrastructure as a service. No conversation is happening these days without Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud being brought up. And so having a conduit, again, to monitor events in those platforms is ideally critical. The thing that we want to avoid is only having eyes and ears in one location, having a sense of comfort when you've got critical data in other areas that you don't have visibility into, and ultimately that typically leads to a negative event. And so, again, the goal for us is to get visibility across the enterprise and ultimately be able to provide a single monitoring solution by the same group of folks, and ultimately, help improve your security program so that in the event that something does happen, that you got the right folks on staff to help you deal with that, and ultimately overcome the event in a short amount of time. So, if that sounds like you, if you need help building a security practice or refining your security practice, we've got a number of ways that we can help you do that. Would certainly love to talk to you more in depth when the time is right.
All right, we can open up for Q&A. I didn't know if anybody had questions in the chat window yet.
If I can't see the chat window, so if there's any questions, feel free to to throw them out. I'm happy to take them.
Okay. I've got one. They have SecureWorks, and they were interested to know, what's a typical migration look like from SecureWorks and additional value adds they may get with Masergy.
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to, I guess, migrating from any other platform over to our platform, it's fairly straightforward. The process that we typically want to go through is to make sure that there's any valuable data or valuable intelligence that we can get from an existing solution, that we do just that. But ultimately, it's always our recommendation to start the implementation of a new service, before your existing service expires, and to give yourself a couple of months buffer to make sure that you've got the new service stood up and operating effectively, and there's no gaps in monitoring, from when the new service stands up and when the old service goes down. And so that's typically the advice that we give. But ultimately, as it relates to SecureWorks, I mean, our target market, is really the medium, or the medium enterprise business, a small to medium enterprise business. And we feel that their target market really is a step above that, meaning that they typically target the Fortune 100, multi-million-dollar engagements, and thus some of their smaller customers suffer. And so, the experience that a lot of folks that come over from a large provider like that is that you just get a lot more deeper level of engagement, simply just because our focus is within this market space, not necessarily within the same target market that they're going after.
All right, we had another question on when there is an incident, how far can your team take the assistance for the client? I've actually seen this where they reported back that they get reported there was an issue with their SOC, but they're left chasing things for a day and a half. So how much can they lean on you guys?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, ultimately the goal for us is to do all the heavy lifting before we engage with the customer. And so I guess there's a couple of different scenarios that we can talk through. We didn't get into this earlier, but we do have technology integrations with firewall platforms and endpoint platforms. And so where technology integration is available, we will actually take first responder action on behalf of our customers. So we will quarantine an endpoint, we'll block a malicious IP address, we'll kind of interact with those products through our backend integrations and do as much as we can to mitigate the threat immediately. But where we don't have technology integration, or where it doesn't make sense for us to step in, let's say that we identify a vulnerable server that needs to be patched. Well, that's something that we need to talk about, something that you have to put into your change management process and ultimately schedule to make sure that there's no service impacting incident by remediating that issue. And so what we do to help compensate a lot of the things, the vulnerabilities that we uncover, is that we'll put in compensating controls to make sure that we're catching any targeted attack towards that system. And so we do curate a lot of the policies specific to a customer environment, so that if you do have a vulnerable system, we have a compensating control in place that will catch something targeting that system and ultimately try to protect it until we have the ability, the remediator, to overcome that issue.
That's fantastic. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up for today. If anybody has any other questions, reach back out to your TTM contact, or we'll be out in contact with you. This will also be available for replay. We'll edit it a little bit and get it out in the next week or so. And Morgan, I really appreciate your time today.
No, thank you for setting this up, and then thanks again to all the attendees for giving us half an hour of your day.